Welcome to nCast, the podcast from nOps. Each week, we'll explore the world of cloud cost management, the latest in AWS optimization, and getting practical about your FinOps journey. Join us as we dive deep into the latest trends, tools, and best practices while having conversations with leaders and luminaries who are innovating on the front lines. Our goal is to provide value to the community through insights and practical advice that will help you to achieve your FinOps goals. So whether you're in engineering, leadership, finance, or a cloud professional, this is the place for you. Sit back, relax, and get ready to join the conversation on nCast.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of nCast. We've been on break for a little bit, and that's because there's been a lot going on in the cloud community and the FinOps community. We've been out at FinOps X and the AWS New York Summit just over the last month that we've had a little pause here. And not by chance, but by my great fortune, I did have the opportunity to meet our guest today for the first time face-to-face at the FinOps X conference. And so I thought, what better opportunity to get her on the podcast here today and share some of her wisdom, and especially from her position. So I'm happy to introduce Sanjna Srivatsa, who is a data scientist over at VMware, and she specializes in FinOps. And thank you for joining us today, Sanjna.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited about our conversation. Sanjna, you're involved in the focus group around FinOps and specifically doing some work around standards. So maybe we can get things kicked off and you could tell us about a little bit of the work that you're doing with the FinOps Foundation.
Absolutely. So the 2-minute spiel of what focus is we're a body of people coming from different backgrounds, trying to put together a specification, basically just general guidelines to say what are the columns that should exist, how they should exist. So with the hopes that all the FinOps vendors that we have out there today and major public cloud vendors will kind of adopt the language and the specification, the format that we lay down while publishing any data relating to cost or usage. Because more and more people are moving towards a multi-cloud system. Every cloud system gets really complicated really quickly when you're in that system and every vendor is talking about the same thing in different words. So this is kind of an effort to put a standard across what are the words we use, how we talk about it, and how we present it to customers so that they don't have to have an entire team of data scientists like me just try to make sense of all of that data.
Right. And we're going to get into some of the challenges that you faced in multi-cloud cost management a little bit later in the conversation. How is the standard coming? What can we expect for the future and its adoption?
So we're really excited. I think the first part was the hardest because we did have our 0.5 version of the spec out in the FinOps X. I think that created a lot of buzz and people were really excited about how easy it could make things. So now I think our team grew like 3-fold now, just after X, which we're really happy about. So now we are expanding to a hybrid cloud. Enterprise, we're talking about private cloud. We're talking about how to incorporate vendors like you. So when you provide your bill via different public cloud providers, how do we incorporate all of that data? So we're really excited. We have a larger team of people working on it, and version 1 is hopefully going to be out in a few months. So we're excited.
So how does adoption look on the horizon? Do we have a lot of interest? Are there going to be some major supporters from both the public clouds and ISVs like ourselves?
So ISVs like you, there's a lot of interest. We have a lot of vendors. We in fact have a separate horizontal just for vendors itself and how to put data in from vendors. From public cloud, from the 3 big names, we have 2 on board right now. Microsoft and Google are playing a very active role. In fact, they're on the governing board, so they play an active role. Not yet so much from AWS, but fingers crossed. Hopefully they come on board soon.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, that initiative was a big topic of conversation at FinOpsX, and it really leads us to the conversation of public cloud spend being bigger than just one cloud, bigger than multi-cloud, but all of the consumption that gets billed back either directly or through the various marketplaces. I can imagine that's a big challenge for you over at VMware.
It's been huge. I think so. We've always been a hybrid cloud, multi-cloud company, even before that was the trend to be. So
before maybe even that was a word, right?
So 4 years ago, I remember I was the first data scientist on the team, and I was just looking at all of this big data, and like everyone's basically trying to say the same thing, but they're saying it so differently, and it made so much sense that the end user of public cloud was so confused because the words and then the price stuff and the way the bills come in, the time that it comes in, and then you have currencies because we operate across different continents. It's too much. And I think the burden should be borne on both sides. One, when the bill is provided, it can try to kind of normalize all those statements. And then the end user also can have a little more guidance on how to compile all of that data to make sense. So that's exactly what we're trying to do with Focus, and hopefully it works.
Well, I would encourage all of our listeners to find out a little bit more about Focus and also get involved. If this is a problem that you face, now is the time to have an opportunity to have an impact and input before the first version of the standard comes out. So
that would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your contribution to the community. So we had an opportunity to talk, and in fact, there was even session tracks in FinOpsX where they talked about the build versus buy conundrum. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the complexity of that decision in an organization like VMware.
We've taken a kind of windy road to coming to our final destination, which is build and buy. We've stopped at different destinations along the path, and initially we only had buy, which is when we acquired Cloud Health, which VMware now owns. So we first acquired, and then that was basically our version of buy. And we use that. And we've also used so many other vendors along the path when we were still gaining maturity in our FinOps journey. So we've mostly focused on build, on buy. But as we gained more context on what problems are specific to VMware, and we cannot expect any other cloud vendor to solve our specific need, we moved to build. I think there was a phase when we very heavily were only focused on build and that we are going to solve our problems leveraging these other platforms. But we finally kind of reached a moment of peace where we're saying that both can coexist. There is not going to be a solution that fits all of our needs. And we have the best business context to know what problems we have and how we can solve them. So we have reached this point where we are building, using what we've bought as a foundation and then building on top of that if we can.
I see. So are you able to leverage some of the tech that you've acquired in your internal tools as a starting place, or is it always a green field?
No, definitely. We use a lot of Cloud Health, which I think is now called AryaCast. They really help us in kind of boiling down the billions of lines of billing data that we have to hundreds of millions, which is a big deal for us already because they take care of the data engineering effort. We leverage Flex reports to then build everything else that we build. We also use native cloud. So we don't only source from one platform. We go to the cloud directly. We use vendors, but this is Cloud Health would be our most biggest source of information.
Interesting. So would you say that your FinOps tooling is in itself a multi-cloud deployment?
It is, yeah. So everything we build on top of vendors is mostly to solve the problem for multi-cloud, because most of the cloud monitoring platforms out there, I mean, if you look at cloud native, like Cost Explorer or BigQuery from GCP, they only obviously surface only one cloud. And most other tools will mostly do one cloud really well, but not exactly do multi-cloud in the level that VMware would expect. So that's exactly where we come up with multi-cloud reporting, because VMware has a very strong mantra, especially our team, the Cloud Business Office. I probably should have led with that. I'm sorry. I'm a data scientist within the Cloud Business Office, and we sit in the center of the entire company and try to collaborate conversations between stakeholders like sourcing, engineering, product, making sure our bill is right, making sure everyone else is being charged back the right amount, basically making sure that VMware pays the least amount of money possible for the workload we have. That's the nature of our team, the Cloud Business
So
Office.
you've got a lot of focus on the pay less lever.
Technically.
That's interesting. And so I understand that you've developed an in-house management system for reservations. We talk a lot about commitment on this podcast in previous episodes. So tell us about the goals of that system and sort of some of the unique characteristics.
You know this about reservation management. If you were to take the three biggest clouds together, I think there are about 30 different unique ways you can buy a commitment, which is a lot. And where the build system comes in is we want to have our end user learn absolutely nothing about specific cloud lingo. We don't really want them to know about or make the decision on if we can do an upfront or a no upfront or a partial upfront, or if you're going to do a 1 year or a 3 year. Where they can provide input is business context. They know what workload they want to have for how long potentially. That's something we want them to worry about. We don't want the average engineer to worry about if you're doing an upfront.
It's too much.
It's too much.
We say that all the time around here. We're in the business of keeping engineers out of the business of understanding pricing plans.
Right.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your mantra, democratizing purchases.
Right. So again, there we have a hybrid model of where the end user does not, if we don't need their input in deciding something for our RI management, we will keep them out of the picture. But for more rigid RIs like RDS, OpenSearch, Elastic Cache, DynamoDB, we would need their input. With the advent of savings plan across all three clouds, we need lesser input from. I don't think we can keep them completely out of the picture at any point, but we would need less input on exactly what usage they plan to keep for how long. That's more of a forecasting problem, right? So we limit the amount of information we need to source from the end user. But for more rigid RIs, we democratize that decision making, because we've had so many situations where we'd have 100 different instances of R6G or something a little more, the latest instance. And we're like, this is definitely going to stay. It's been stable for 7 months. We should buy. And as soon as we buy a 1 year or a 3 year, they get shut down like 30 days after. Yeah, so it's happened way too many times, and we've kind of learned that we need to definitely involve them very tightly in that decision making.
So what is your reaction to that situation? So it happens in every organization, and at scale, it can make a real impact. So, with these very rigid commitments, RDS comes up all the time, OpenSearch, of course. What happens when you go into an underutilization situation, or do you have a way to consume those, or maybe even in the sort of concept of an internal marketplace to evangelize that maybe they could be used by other services?
That's a very good point of why we have a central RI management system. When you allow the end user to go and buy their own things, we've seen that some engineering managers can get overzealous with their purchasing just because it's such an easy way to see savings since day one, which is why we have taken control of all purchasing from the center. So we either have to approve it or we have to do it ourselves. We are not giving an intern or anybody else permission to go buy RIs because it could come from the wrong motive at that point without understanding the long-term impact. We basically look at the RI marketplace as we look at the stock market. You want to diversify, we diversify. Right. You buy early and often, we buy early and often. We obviously need input data from different sources. You probably read the news, you read companies' earnings report before you buy. That's similar to what we do. We talk to our stakeholders before we make large decisions. But since we incorporate these best practices, we also have some threshold for mistakes. We know mistakes will happen, but all we need to make sure is that our purchase is going to be cheaper, is going to make the usage cheaper than it would have been on demand. Basically, pay the least amount of money possible for a workload, right? So we just want to make sure that the benefit we're getting is always outweighs the amount we would have paid if we were entirely on demand. So there's obviously times our utilization is not 100%, but for the most part, we do great. We have one of the best, according to AWS, we have one of the best ESRs, which is effective savings rate in the industry. So we're really happy about that.
In the industry, in the world. So you must be doing some things right. So tell me about how you build intelligence into your platform.
We have an algorithm which we have built from scratch. With the RI marketplace, it's just, we're so huge and we save a few $100 million every year. So that was just an easy decision for us to know to have in-house. We have leveraged vendors and we continue to use them, but for the most part, we have complete control over our EC2 portfolio. Like I said, just look at it just like we look at the stock market. We kind of have an algorithm which evaluates any new usage that is uncovered. We, at any point of time, will evaluate our threshold. We are not 100% covered at all times. That doesn't make sense. We have the algorithm actively calculate what our threshold should be for, we have a set of rules which kind of govern what our coverage should be, what utilizations acceptable, at what point of time action is needed, at what point of time people need to be got together. So if an expiry is coming in 60 days, we'll start a conversation 60 days before to make sure that stakeholders are involved and we don't wait until the expiry happens to then talk about if we need to buy a refill or just change action. So all of these things coming together is helping us save hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
Okay. And, here's just, I guess, a little bit out of left field, but, you're not 100% covered. No one is 100% covered. But then there is available capacity like Spot from Amazon. Spot is tricky to do in an organization of your size. We've seen time and time again, especially over here at nOps, the best intentioned team in a larger organization trying to leverage Spot when there's a central team that manages reservation, and they have no idea that the Spot usage is generating actual waste on reservation. So you're actually losing money. You're not saving it, right? So
right.
How do you manage that? Does it, are there regulations? Are there policies? Do you steer clear of it? What's the story?
I think that feeds into our democratization of data, right? So if there's ever going to be a big change in utilization, we have a forum for people to come and talk to us. They may have said, I want to buy an RDS RI. And then 6 months later, they may say, no, we've changed our mind. We want to stop it. So at any point of time, if things are going to change, we have created that communication channel that people can talk to us. We have these entities called cost champions within each business unit, and they're kind of responsible for cost. They're actively monitoring costs. This is just all, you can say, kind of gimmicks to make sure people are cost aware, right? People don't want to be cost aware. So these are ways we incentivize this ongoing cost awareness. So we have that communication channel with these individual people, and we course correct as needed.
Okay. So I remember many years ago when I first went from the mode of being in a hyper growth startup to being acquired by a big company. And we were first exposed to what I would say was a true cloud cost optimization exercise. And one of our first moves was to make reservations. It seemed very obvious. We thought we had done the right thing. And then we realized 3 months down the road that we had not made a good decision, and that we actually, for customers and performance sake, needed to move to a different technology. It sounds like in your organization, in my case, we were in trouble. Right. I like to say that in many organizations, FinOps and cloud cost optimization is often, to an engineer, a punitive exercise. You're in trouble because you're spending too much. You're in trouble because you made the wrong commitment. Sounds like the culture of VMware is very different. We communicate about a reservation that maybe we don't need any longer, and then you figure out how to act. Would you say that that's a part of the culture?
That is a part of the culture, where we have to find the right balance between being strict and making sure there is some form of punishment or some form of negative reinforcement that this doesn't happen again. They're not like, oh, mommy and daddy are going to take care of it, right? Like, we don't want that culture to thrive.
Fair
So
enough.
there has to be a balance between few mistakes are okay. Things change all the time. We will try to make sure we do the best possible. But
Right.
if we are not able to, then the cost kind of ties back to them.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So the impact, it sounds like, has been very substantial. Does that impact allow you to make other technology decisions across the organization? Do you ever come across, we'd love to move to a different technology, and we have to do an exercise that justifies that technology purchase? And how can cloud economics play a factor in allowing an organization to adopt new cool technologies that maybe have an impact on features that they're able to deliver to their customers?
Yeah, that's something that happens very often for us, because VMware, I don't know how many people know this, but sells a lot of products on the cloud. So we have a product called VMC on AWS. We have a version of that for Azure and GCP also. So that requires not just having them as a cloud provider, but partnership. And that means we sometimes will have access to their latest instance type before most others will. And that's where unit economics comes through, right? What region do we release it first in? What region do we start testing? Even before we have deterministic data on how much something like this would cost, that's where we actively have to know just how much our unit cost is. And we work with our cloud providers for that. And we also feed that into our RI model, because sometimes we just have to hit the ground running and have coverage from day one, because usage can spike up pretty quickly. So we have active communication with the cloud providers, and we have our RI model kind of always active to help there.
Does your group help different teams within VMware to understand the cost impact or the unit economics for the services, products, and features that they're responsible to deliver?
Very actively. So yes, that's a big part of our team's job description.
Okay. All right. And I wonder, I always think that the side effect of delivering unit economics, and the part of unit economics, is that it gives the teams that are responsible for these services a lot of insight that they maybe would not have had about the efficiency of their application. Cost efficiency is just efficiency, and sometimes we end up having better performance, better reliability, all of these things just by studying things from this angle. Do you find that teams find a lot of value out of the tooling that you're able to provide to them?
We have tooling, and it's tooling is, I think, mostly for optimization and visibility. For questions that you just posed, it's really hard to have tooling for something like that, right? Because let's take, for example, guard duty or Shield, AWS Shield. You can technically reduce your cost on either of these services by going for not opting for Shield Advanced, by going for a lower level of security. But is that always the right move? Right? It will save you money, but is your application going to be safe with you downgrading from advanced to not advanced? So for those kind of conversations, we have architects on our team who kind of are actively involved during product design phase and kind of have something to say, because it's always cost, and like we have cost is always a part of the picture, but it's not always the only thing that decides what happens.
Sure.
So yeah, so
security,
we have our
security
people
is job zero, as they say, right?
Absolutely. Agreed. Yep. So we have our people involved in these conversations, but we are a team just there to help. We will never make architecture decisions for you. It's ultimately your cost and you are responsible for it. We're here to help do anything we can to reduce the cost and to aid in that decision making, but ultimately the product decisions are left to the product owners.
Well, just kind of shifting gears a little bit, I imagine that the concept of a chargeback in an organization of this scale, and especially with a well-developed centralized team, is a very complex thing to accomplish. How do you manage chargebacks and juggle this across a multi-cloud, multi-ISV sort of world?
I think even prouder than our team is of producing these millions of dollars of savings in RI management, we're proud of having a multi-cloud single pane of glass for chargeback. So we have normalized data across 3 clouds, and we have it in a way that people can understand. So it's not millions of rows, it's a few thousands, and it's a level that they can slice and dice and still understand what they're being charged for. And our RI management kind of feeds heavily into this, because since we handle ESR for EC2, we kind of handle all the decisions and we make sure that we get the best ESR for them. We, for the lack of a better word, peanut butter spread right across everyone. It's called equitable chargeback. We've written a blog with AWS on it, where we come with it in a different approach to say, we're doing a lot of decisions on EC2 for you, for RI management. If you didn't have a say in what gets bought, you will not be penalized by any cloud provider on what RI you got. If you get a 1-year RI or a 3-year RI on your workload, the discount is quite different. So we don't want you to be penalized for anything like that. Or if AWS decides that 1 hour your use case is the one that gets on demand and no kind of RI discount, we don't want anyone to be arbitrarily penalized for stuff like this, which their budget would not have accounted for. So we take this equitable chargeback, have our RI model feed into it. And so that gives the benefit of premium support. For example, we do have premium support charges, credits, any marketplace charges that need to go to the right place because that gets built at the payer level. All of that, any unused RI that we may have, all of that gets equitably distributed to everyone based on how much they have consumed of a particular service in that month.
Interesting. So it's really how effective your team is that at the end of the day has a huge impact on the budgets and sort of the budget attainment for the different teams in your organization. Sounds like a lot of pressure, but I imagine that also makes forecasting a little bit tricky for teams, especially when if I'm an engineer or a product manager or a product owner, when I go to do forecasting, it may not be clear to me how much I'll actually be paying for a given service. So tell us about those challenges and your approach to forecasting.
Quite the contrary, actually. If you have AWS take complete, or any other clouds take complete control on, and most of us don't have 100% coverage all the time, right? Which means you're always functioning on some amount of on-demand. If you let your cloud providers make that decision on who gets on-demand when, or who gets your 1 year versus an all upfront versus basically different discounts, they are so confused on what should be their unit rate that they should be forecasting for. But that's entirely solved with equitable chargeback. Since we have a normalized number that everyone pays, and if we do a good job, the number doesn't change significantly over time.
I see.
So that actually solves that problem of forecasting, because we know exactly how much we're paying. Now people know exactly how much they're paying per NFU for I3 or M5 in Oregon, for example. And again, this data is also neutral to multi-cloud. So we have that data as a rate card in one place for people to help with forecasting and budget and stuff like that.
I see. So when doing forecasting, they will come to your system and use your normalized numbers in order to do their forecasting from. Is there anything else that's unique about your forecasting approach?
We also, there is a little bit of a chicken and egg problem with forecasting and budget, right? Like what is supposed to feed into what? Do we come up with our own forecast and then do we set a budget on it, or do we use our current budget and use that to forecast for tomorrow? We do both. We do a little bit of both. So we use our chargeback data, which is deterministic. We know how much you've used. Based on that, we've created a chargeback, but we're not leaving anything out of the picture, right? We have taxes, we have premium support, all of these shared costs, which may not be apparent to the end user on a cloud monitoring platform. We will bake all of those numbers in. Based on chargeback, we create a forecast. And based on that forecast, we set a budget and then track your burn down every day. So if your quarter started today and we have already made a forecast based on your chargeback numbers, we will track every day how you are doing against that budget burn down, so that if you're 5 days before the month closes and you've already burned through your budget, you will know immediately. And if there's any workloads you can turn off before the month is done, you can do that.
Kick the can down the road, as they say. And what would you say in terms of chargeback and forecast? How has this changed your organization in the time that you've been at VMware? Have you seen a substantial change in the way that things operate?
Absolutely. I think a lot of what I'm talking about is very recent. We were pretty primitive in our forecasting and budgeting practices early on. But I don't know if you've heard, but VMware is getting acquired by Broadcom. Just kidding. I'm sure people have heard that we're getting acquired by Broadcom. And so everyone's like kind of getting a little spiffy with their budgeting and forecasting, and like we're all holding ourselves more accountable for
Right. I've been through many sides of acquisition, and I know it's a time that people are worried about change and also coming under the magnifying glass. So sounds like timing is good because you have done a lot to build maturity in your organization.
Right. There's long ways to go, but we're definitely getting there, and we're seeing the advent of a hierarchical forecasting method where it's not just one person within one business or within one business unit who just makes a decision on what our forecast should be. It's not just a linear regression anymore. It's multiple people having a say in how they feel their product is going to do, how many contracts are getting renewed, and then based on that, we kind of extrapolate these numbers. So we're definitely on the path to getting way more advanced, but they're all still in the works and a little more recent.
Well, like I said, it sounds like your team has contributed a lot to advance that cause. Are there any other specific challenges that your team deals with multi-cloud management?
I think a problem that our team was just discussing today was that sometimes billing data will get rewritten even after a month closes. So the CURD, we don't even have to wait for the month to close. Even through the month, AWS will go back and rewrite a bunch of lines in the CURD. And like for
we
budget
see that
burn
all
down,
the time. Yeah,
I'm sure you do. I like for when you're tracking things like budget burn down, and when you're being so strict and you want to do the right thing, and then they go back and rewrite numbers, that can get really frustrating. And so that's been top of mind. That's what comes to me as a challenge. It's definitely something we hope gets resolved in the future.
yeah. Well, I mean, we've learned that to be a fact of life, especially working as closely with AWS. And you know, we've had to adjust application features because we have to be prepared. Anything can be rewritten at any time, and also things can come out of order, right? Just because you've gotten a cost and usage report, for instance, and the last line item in that cost and usage report for an EC2 instance is sort of like not the end of time. There could be other services that are a little bit behind on reporting. So
right,
it's constantly shifting.
It is shifting, and it also depends on if you have automation turned on. That also changes the way line items come in. Sometimes if you don't have automation turned on, your curve will rewrite until 20th of the following month. But if you have it turned on, they say they won't rewrite it, but we've seen it happening a bunch of times when they go back even like 3 months before and rewrite stuff. So that's really been a problem because our burn down goes all over the place and causes some frustration.
I'm sure it can, and again, operating at scale, the rewriting history can be significant. Are there any complexities or anything that people should keep in mind in the way that for instance reservations or commitments are applied from one cloud to another?
I would say at the core of our algorithm, this is what we do. Try to break down any commitment into attributes. So we may call it standard RI, or we may call it a CUD, or we may call it a flex CUD that's recently come up. But what does it really mean in terms of its rigidity, in terms of its term, in terms of its payment options? If you kind of break it down to its individual attributes, I think you can definitely build your own set of rules or algorithm or a smart RI management system.
I see. Yeah, a common language, much akin to the work that you're doing in Focus.
Right.
Well, you know, we're close to the end of our time together here today, but I want to ask you one last question, and that is, what do you see in the future, advances or challenges that teams are going to face with multi-cloud workloads?
Challenges with multi-cloud workloads. If I have a wish, I would hope for, as much as I really like the smart RI management system we've built, I would really hope that RIs are lesser a part of the future than they are today. A lot of decisions right now are very heavily based on RIs, and it's the bread and butter of a lot of vendors, I know, but that just speaks to how complex the system is today. I really think public cloud vendors, or I hope that they do a better job making it simpler than it is today. Apart from RIs, I think change management is something that we've seen to be a complex problem for products that are deployed in multiple clouds. Releasing different patches, making sure that the latency issues in networking and like SLAs, all of that are kind of compliant across multiple clouds. That's kind of complex. And so I hope there is better guidance and there are better ways to make that simpler.
Yeah, I think that your vision and hopes are the same for a lot of people in the community and in industry. Here's to a world where there is less complexity. I mean, we were promised by the public clouds a consumption-based model, yet these commitments are very counterintuitive to consumption-based. So it makes it especially challenging for us to fully realize the elasticity of the public cloud. Well, this has been a great conversation today. I hope we get the opportunity to do it again. For the listeners out there, if you've kept up with us and you're still listening, then you're probably as nerdy as we are on these topics. And we hope that you stay tuned for the next episode of nCast. So thank you, Sanjna.
And thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful time chatting with you. Thank you, James.
Let's do it again. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to nCast. We hope you enjoyed the episode. As you can tell, we love to geek out on all things cloud optimization. If you have any questions or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram, or just shoot us an email at ncast@nops.io. If you'd like to learn more about the continuing innovation over at nOps or about our free FinOps platform where you never pay anything unless you save money, check us out over at www.nops.io.